After his no contest at UFC 321, Tom Aspinall has become public enemy number 1 for the UFC. Now you may be thinking, Tom didn't really do anything wrong, he was just doing his job, and through no fault of his own, he very abruptly couldn't do his job anymore. I would tend to agree with you, but Dana White, his lover, and his lackeys would like to have a word. Immediately after the event, it's a huge disaster, a shit cherry on a shit Sunday, and the fan base is panicking. And in the haze, in the confusion, Dana White immediately goes into full damage control mode. Dana said that Ciryl Gane, quote, had Tom bloodied up, Tom didn't want to continue in the fight, the rematch is very interesting. That's the biggest quote that came out of the media scrum, but I wanted to give Dana the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this was taken out of context, maybe it was part of a larger sentence. No, that was just it. So I ended up watching the rest of Dana White's post-fight presser, and it's actually worse. Oscar Willis asks him about his reaction to the foul in the fight, and Dana's first thought was to praise Ciryl Gane. It's beyond parody, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of people wrote him off after the Jones fight, but he looked damn good tonight. Then Oscar presses a little bit, asking about how you tell if an eye poke is accidental or not, and how the UFC intends to fix the eye poking issue, and Dana just says, who gives a shit? What are you gonna do? I'm obviously not 100% sure how you'd fix the eye poke issues either, but brushing them off as who gives a shit is super ignorant to the unified rules and to fighter safety, and for those reasons, I'm out. But Dana White wasn't the only one working overtime to make Aspinall seem like some sort of quitter. Chael Sonnen on the ESPN panel said, to fight with one eye is very common. You're the heavyweight champion of the world. You gotta fight with one eye sometimes. He's sitting there with Anthony Smith and they're sucking each other off big time, okay? Anthony's talking about how he had to fight through eye pokes in Singapore. True, but it's a 3-rounder against Ryan Spann in a fight where you're both fighting for a spot in the top 10. Little bit different from a world championship fight at heavyweight. I don't know Tom Aspinall personally, I'm not a Tom Aspinall expert, but from what I do know, there's not a lot of information out there that would lead me to the conclusion that he's a quitter. After the eye poke, Tom had no eyes. Okay, maybe half an eye, max. I keep rewatching the eye poke and it gets worse every single time I watch it, and I also notice something different every single time, If you really want to look into the details here, Gane's left finger went downwards against Tom's eye, and then it went to the roof of his eyeball, kind of into his orbital, and then Gane pushed down and pulled out and around like he almost hooked it. It was weird. And then the right finger, it was just sitting on the eyelid, not doing anything. And then it gets pushed in. The initial eye poke wasn't that bad, and it wouldn't have done too much damage. It probably would have allowed the fight to just continue. But Gane essentially used Aspinall's eyes as a point of contact to push off to gain backwards momentum and float out of range. That's where the real damage was done, the secondary motion. You can also see Gane tracked Aspinall's eyes as he's coming in at a different point in the fight and during that eye poke sequence as well. So it's not like Aspinall is just running into outstretched fingers, and even if he was, it's on Gane to not have them outstretched. The worst people you know, or even don't know, for that matter, have had the most brain-dead takes on this situation. Truly mind-boggling. I understand that the MMA space online, pretty toxic. Sports in general, pretty toxic. I would say MMA's probably higher up on the list. But the sheer divisiveness of what should be a pretty simple outcome. Oh, Aspinall got poked in a fight that was kind of close. Let's move on. Let's rebook it. That feels like the simple answer that an average person would have. But everybody has this weird range of ideas. They want to be so smart. They want to be a hardcore fan. They want to say something different. They want to have a new perspective. So they want to say Tom's a quitter. And they want to say that he was 100% going to lose that fight. And yes, obviously the fight wasn't going the best for Tom. He was struggling with a few things here and there. But he was pushing Gane back to the fence. He was finding his range as the round went on. He was landing some leg kicks, chopping at Gane's legs, And the numbers favored Gane by 3 or 4 strikes. It was a close round. I would probably give it to Gane if we had a full continuous round. But again, Aspinall was coming forward during that last 30 seconds. Maybe he lands one more thing that swings the round in his favor. I don't know. Maybe he KOs Gane 10 seconds after that eye poke sequence. We don't know. We don't get to know. Which sucks for sure. But it's not like Tom's nose was completely busted up. It wasn't in a different area code from the rest of his face like Strickland's, He didn't get the wrestling going, but he only shot once, and it was closer to a clinch or a body lock takedown than a conventional double leg that he usually shoots. He didn't fully commit to it. It was more like a kind of half-level change, non-committal, let's see how Gane reacts to this type thing. I don't think he was trying to get a takedown. I think if he really wanted to, he could have exerted himself and used a lot of energy, but he didn't. So to act like Tom was getting completely outclassed in the grappling and the striking in every realm of combat, I mean, it's silly. And then to say that he found a way out of the fight when he was losing, you're just wrong. You're double wrong. You're wrong on both fronts. But that's what I think a lot of people see because there's a bit of contrast bias, right? Tom hasn't really bled in the octagon before, and he usually KOs his opponents in the first minute. That's the opposite of what happened here, where Tom is fighting later into the first, and he's bleeding a little bit. Anyone else, and it's an average performance, but Tom is held to a bit of a higher standard, and people will contrast this performance with the rest of his performances, and then come to the conclusion that it was bad. I hope that makes sense because that's how I feel a lot of people are seeing this fight. And you can just feel the UFC and establishment MMA media piling on a narrative that the majority of fans don't really believe. Because Aspinall is now a pain in the ass for the UFC. From their perspective, he's made their GOAT look bad, he wants to leave for boxing, and he and a UFC staff member are making disparaging comments about the state of the division that they're trying to hype up. Those comments ended up being very true because Volkov versus Almeida was a snooze fest. But the UFC needs to act as though everything is fine and act as though all of their divisions are healthy. Tom Aspinall's father, Andy Aspinall, revealed that he didn't want Tom to re-sign at the end of his deal and that he wanted him to go off and box. This was a major blunder on their part, and the UFC obviously got wind of this. So now, the UFC will do everything in their power to devalue Aspinall before he potentially makes that move. He has the belt, so they have to include him in the title picture, but if he didn't have the belt, if he somehow lost to Gane in this fight, or it ended up going to like a majority decision or something strange like that, they would be booking Gane versus Lewis 2 in a heartbeat, because they care about the French market, and they care about their TKO leader. So it puts Tom in a really weird position where he's fighting for a company that hates his guts and probably wants to see him fail. Jon Jones and Alex Pereira have now officially called each other out on the same day immediately after Aspinall versus Gane, kind of overshadowing it, saying that they're going to bring order to the heavyweight division or make it great again or whatever they said. And I'm not saying that Dana told them to do this. That would be a little bit crazy. But it does seem like an opportunity to kind of cut Aspinall out of the picture. Taking two guys with a ton of name value, throwing them on the White House card with a heavyweight BMF belt or something equivalent, and then trying to pass that off as the actual baddest man on the planet, subverting Aspinall even if he does beat Gane next year. So Tom ends up having less leverage to go and box. It's exactly what they tried to do with Francis and Gane and Jones. History is repeating itself. So I present to you what I would do if I was the UFC. Also, I'm evil. Tom's being a little whiny bitch and he wants to leave us. We're gonna leave him first, either by pissing him off to where he leaves, or hopefully he loses to Gane on the way out the door. That ends up creating a closed loop where Jon Jones has a win over the heavyweight champion. It's ideal for the UFC and its evil plan. So with Tom off boxing and Ciryl as a champion who's already lost to Jones, Jones gains legitimacy as the best heavyweight MMA fighter in the world. Again, this is not my perspective. This is the greasy, grimy UFC appealing to casuals and people who know nothing. Okay, maybe Jon ends up fighting Ciryl again to unify, him being the best technically with like the actual belt, but probably not. I don't think there's enough time before the White House. So the UFC has a bit of a star problem right now, and they're pretty short-sighted. Instead of building an ensemble cast, like I have suggested, where each champion is kind of popular, and they build a whole roster of smaller stars, and then everybody has like their own market, and you bring in your Polish Rebecca fans, and you bring in your British Tom Aspinall fans, you bring in your degenerate O'Malley fans, etc., etc. The UFC wants to put their eggs in a couple of very specific baskets, mainly the Alex Pereira basket. Alex Pereira beating Tom Aspinall would be pretty big. Tom Aspinall beating Jon Jones would be pretty big. But instead of building up Alex or Tom a little bit, Alex Pereira beating Jon Jones would be the matchup that gives you the most star power to transfer to Pereira moving forward, as Jon Jones probably retires and goes out the door. But you can't do that when Tom is the consensus top dog, so you have to circumvent him. The whole thing is probably a stretch, but knowing how the UFC treats fighters that they don't like, or fighters who have outlasted their usefulness, it wouldn't surprise me if something like this goes down. But no matter what happens, Aspinall has to watch his back, because even though most of the fighters in his division aren't a threat, behind the scenes politicking has killed many a career. Let me know what you think about Tom Aspinall, Ciryl Gane, UFC 321, Dana White, all of it in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more MMA content. Shout out to Proletarian Gothic, Vanny, and Stu for being vampiric enjoyers. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't reveal your secret plans, and have a good time.